So, I'd like to welcome to Krav Life, Mr. Alec Rains. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Can you tell our viewers where you located out of right now?
We are in Cedar Park, which is a suburb of Austin, Texas, so Central Texas,
Nice.
just north of the capital.
Nice. I'm sure it's nice and cold in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not at all.
No.
So let's start with tell us a little bit about yourself, like your background. Like, is Krav Maga the first thing that you've done, or do you have like prior experience, martial arts experience to Krav? Like, how did you get involved in all this?
I started martial arts when I was 5 years old, back in the 80s, and it was a play date with a friend kind of a thing. So it's not like you go seek a certain system or anything like that, but it was a Tung Sido school. Turned out that I liked it enough after watching my friend do it that I wanted to join myself. And my parents had talked about getting me into some sort of martial art style anyways, so it was convenient. But ultimately, it turned out that my instructor's teacher was Chuck Norris. And and so we got to be part of that network in Southern California for a number of years. And I developed through that all the way until early college. And then I switched into a different system based off of a company that I was working for that taught Shotokan. And so I trained for 13 years in Shotokan. And so I ended up, by the time I was 30, having a couple of black belts in a couple of different styles with 15 years of teaching experience combined over those years. And it was always a side gig that was never going away. And when it came time for me to realize I need to do something a little bit more dedicated to my own control of things, I had already kind of dabbled in other martial arts and realized I needed something that was more practical, not as ceremonial. I appreciate some of the elements of the traditional martial arts, but I also wished that I could have some more freedoms and liberties to things that would be kind of street oriented versus classical kata. And then you have to find your translation of how that applies to real world. And the sparring elements, the point sparring concepts were, to me, limiting. And I started really not liking the style versus style conversations that were going on. And even watching early UFC fights, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stuff where it was literally jiu-jitsu versus karate or all that stuff. It was I kept wondering why you can't mix a lot of those things that work well together, and why aren't they? And of course, that was the evolution of martial arts ultimately, and Krav Maga was doing that.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, the one thing that always kind of bothered me about those early UFCs was that it was billed, karate versus jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. I'm more of a believer in the better martial artist is going to win.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't
absolutely. It was
matter whether it's stand-up.
The style is not the thing.
Or ground fighting. It's like whoever's better is going to win. Yeah, it's the individual, right? And so you had like a lot of prior experience teaching. When did you, like, how long ago did you start your own studio?
Well, we moved to Austin in 2013, and about 18 months after we moved here, I was able to start our own business, the Mat Martial Arts. And we ultimately bought a studio that was Krav Maga, and the owner at that time was trying to sell himself out. He wanted to get out of the business. So we took over his facility and changed the name to our own, revamped a lot of the programming that was in there. And I had been familiar with Krav Maga. I had trained in various versions of it, formally and informally, for a little bit prior. It was affiliated with a different organization that I didn't have a whole lot of faith in their support system in the US at that time. And we had a bit of a falling out of, or disagreement of sorts, on how to implement what they wanted done, or the lack of structure behind what they wanted done. And so we disassociated from that group. And And ultimately we're kind of independent. And so we kept pulling from other styles to see what we like to do to offer similar principles of what the Krav training was about, but didn't have to be specific to the way that this one person said it needed to be. And after a little bit of time, we ultimately settled with an organization called Fit to Fight that branched away from Krav Maga for a little bit, or the concepts of what we know as Krav Maga, because of the same exact reasoning. And that was one of the things that drew me in, was they wanted to fill some gaps and voids by drawing from other styles, but followed the principles of what Krav Maga was built on back when Imi was forming everything.
Right.
And so it allowed me to have a lot more of my background become functional in how we operate, and take some wrestling, take some jiu-jitsu, take some Muay Thai, and find ways that things that work can still work within those principles and then be more universally acceptable.
Nice. Can you give us an example of like what sort of gaps they identified in traditional Krav?
In my experience, you had a lot of what we like to kind of call prescription-based problem solving.
Okay.
Here is the problem you are trying to solve, and it would be, a choke from this angle, and then you would learn how to respond to a choke from angle 1, and then here's another problem, a choke from angle 2, and then here's another problem, a choke from angle 3, and another problem, a choke from angle, whatever. Okay, now they're doing this while they're pushing, and then now they're doing this while they're pulling, and now you got 6 different responses to 6 different problems, when the reality is you could have a solution that would take care of 95% of all of those with one type of familiar movement that you don't have to catalog through how to respond to, because you've built repetition over time of doing something that follows principles, and you just have to apply those principles into that problem. So it wasn't like you've got this issue and you've got this problem. They have to be tied together. This is an issue, but the problem can be solved universally with a lot of things that, across the board.
Okay. So what is like your teaching philosophy then? Like when you're teaching brand new students, like how do you indoctrinate them into the Krav world, so to speak? Trial by fire.
I mean, there is a little fire that we throw them into, just to give them a sense of understanding that what we're doing is starting off in a vacuum for safety, but you got to remove that enclosed, chamber of where things work exactly that we're talking about it, once you start to bring in some stress testing and some elements that are a little unforeseen. And so you build up repetition, you build up some principles and fundamentals of movements and understanding of range and tools that you can use. And then you start to kind of increase a little bit of the opportunities to recognize that under stress, it's not going to be as pretty as we just practiced. So you really need to be able to rely on understanding how to adapt within that scenario, which means the repetition of the fundamentals will find their place once you've got them repeated enough. But you always need to have these principles in mind regardless. And so if you can get free of that scenario or free of that danger by following those principles, the skills you use to do them can vary. It's not about this skill for that problem. It's about these concepts, and you have skills in your tool belt that you can then draw from to apply.
Nice. Now, when new people come into your facility, do they do an introductory class, or do you just throw them into a regular class?
Excuse me. Yeah, we have them coming into a regular class. We have beginner level classes, and we have some all level classes that are more beginner centric, and then we have advanced classes also. So we find out what works for their schedule, and we find out where their interests are, because some of our classes aren't Krav Maga based at all. Some of them are a little bit more boxing, kickboxing, or Muay Thai. Some of them more grappling, more conditioning based versus technical based. And so we can kind of figure out where their interests are before we have them come into a day. And then we let them take a couple of classes in a row if they want to. So if they want to take a boxing class and then a Krav class, they're welcome to do that because they're back to back. And we'll have them, we'll filter them towards classes that are geared more for beginners. So it's an easier pace for them to jump in and feel accepted with the material and the content. So they're not going to be completely blown out of the water with, I don't know what to do with this grappling scenario, or, weapons defense first day.
Nice. So I don't know. How do you find people are right now? Because a lot of areas of the country are seeing like increase in violence. People like in our area, people are way more tense, a lot more road rage type stuff. What are you finding in Austin?
We have kind of an interesting situation going on. One, because we are in Texas, and Texas has been lifted of a lot of restrictions
Right.
sooner than most other states in the country. And so the COVID scenarios that we're dealing with are, we've been physically running classes in studio since July of 2020. We went from March to July of doing online classes, and starting in July, we were hybridizing all of them. So, and to this day, every single class we have, you can be online or you can be in studio.
Mm-hmm.
As it stands right now, the only people who are doing online are the ones who have some sort of a member in their family is dealing with some autoimmune or respiratory situation where they're not willing to take a chance of coming in to interact with people anywhere. So everything they're doing is online right now until everyone in their family can feel safe, and whether it's through vaccination or through general health concerns going down to a certain level. But I'd say at this point right now, we're looking at about 85% of our membership is in studio, and we have all protocols being met here in studio so that people feel safe. But that's not really that huge of a concern for most people. And as a matter of fact, we get more calls of people asking if we are making them wear masks or not because they don't want to wear a mask when they train than anything else. And we have to sit there and say, well, some of these classes, for kids, for example, we're still asking kids to wear masks, and because our instructors wear masks and everybody isn't vaccinated yet. On the adult side of things, it's more of a mixed bag. Take COVID out of it, and Austin itself is such a mixed bag of politics that Texas is on one side of the spectrum for a lot of the policies that you would have in terms of gun violence or gun rights, I should say, and then Austin is the exact opposite of most of Texas. So there is some gun violence and some discussions about all of that here, but whether it's open carry, concealed carry, all of those things, the people who we are surrounded by, they're very willing to have a conversation about pretty much anything. And you'll get an opinion, but they're still willing to accept the fact that somebody else might have a difference of opinions. And it's not, you're wrong because it's different than I believe. It's you believe differently than me, but I get that. And, maybe one day you'll think differently, but for right now we disagree, but you're still cool. I like you. So we're pretty good on that side of things. We do have some recent shooting and scenarios in Austin, but that's 20 miles away from us. And it is a different situation in the suburbs versus downtown, so to speak. And so we're pretty cool where we are. I have some friends who have studios in Austin, and they're dealing with a lot more of the dynamic of social awareness and sensitivities towards significantly different opinions and clashing of those opinions. We don't have as much of that here in the suburbs, I think, because it's a lot more mixed.
And do you find, is there an increase in interest in Krav Maga right now, where you are?
Yes. Yeah. I it's interesting because where we are is where a lot of the tech companies are moving offices to from the West Coast. So they're calling us kind of California Central. We have a lot of the California personalities coming into the Texas world. And I am a Californian, so I appreciate what's coming in, but I've been here long enough that I also appreciate where Texas stands on certain things. And so it's a nice blend of opinions. And so as a result, we end up having a lot more interest in handgun training, handgun defense. We do a lot of LTC style of course training here to provide people with introduction to working with handguns and understanding the difference between, manipulation and preparedness and somebody has the interest and the curiosity behind having a weapon in their household now, and they want to learn the education behind what the responsibilities are and how that means, you know, what you need to do with that. And it's nice because having come from that world and being in this world and having a business that does a lot of that training that I didn't used to have, you get a nice understanding about how you can provide an education as a service for all of these things, and then really open up the world towards why certain rights are protected, or why this interest is important to preserve, whether you like it or not. Because this is something that is a huge contentious piece here, is the, you know, Second Amendment rights, and Texas is very much an advocate for having that stuff. And so, you know, whether you own a handgun or not, the knowledge behind that is important.
So does that form an important part of your curriculum, because you are in Texas and gun rights are a huge deal there? Does that form a big part of your curriculum? Like, is there more of a focus
in there
in your area?
I would say it's more of a topic for seminars that we run on a regular
Okay.
basis. We do have gun defense in our curriculum,
Right.
but utilizing the actual gun on your person, that's more seminar topics. But we do run a lot of those, whether it's how, you know, if you are a conceal or open carry person, and then you have to choose to use your weapon in public, or the discussion of using your weapon in public, or home defense, or, you know, that kind of stuff, or just literally understanding the mechanics and the workings of using a gun in a dry fire and a live fire scenario. We do a lot of those trainings on weekends, you know, as separate topics. And knife stuff too, because a lot of people here carry pocket knives just as utility tool. So it becomes a conversation for us, is like, look, you may not have something, but if the guy in the road rage scenario does, and he decides to draw that, now this is an element of the discussion that you need to have.
So you're like trying to draw awareness to the actual reality that people are living in your areas, that, you know, people do carry guns and knives there, and where they might not be used, they're there.
Yeah, I mean, there's videos of, like, cell phone or dash cam camera stuff of highway incidences right around our neighborhood, of somebody gets into a little fender bender and he steps out of his car and he has a pipe, or he has a knife, or he draws a gun for intimidation purposes, if nothing else. I remember in California laughing at scenarios where somebody talks about why you would train for that. And then it's a reality here that I didn't have to deal with, because somebody can carry a gun in their body anytime they want to here in Texas, that legally you're not supposed to in California. So that was really not something that the common individual would have to concern themselves with. It would be you know, something you'd seek out knowledge for. But here, anybody who walked next to could be carrying a weapon, and you wouldn't know it until they decide to use it. And so that is something that can be a huge piece of the conversation for somebody who maybe didn't think about it prior.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things that I had to get used to when I was visiting down there, and being from Canada, we don't carry guns, right?
Right.
We have guns, but we don't carry them. And I remember having dinner, and you know, I was the only person. There must have been like 10 or 12 of us at the table, and I was like the only person that was not carrying a gun. Right. And it just, it just kind of hit me. I'm like, holy cow, this is a completely different reality from what I'm used to, because in Canada, no one would have it. Right. Yeah. Sure. Pocket knives and stuff like that we can carry, but we wouldn't, but guns, it's not a reality. So where we train for, you know, are the same weapon defenses that you guys would train, it's not the same focus, right? Because in the back of our heads, we know that the odds of us encountering that here are lower. So our focus tends to be more on the open hand, I guess, type side. So uh, and knife defense,
Mhm.
because that is stuff that we would encounter. Knife attacks or attacks with improvised weapons, right? Sticks, rocks, stuff like that happens here. Like you said, a pipe, right? People, I know people that carry like baseball bats in their cars, right? Just because you never know. Um, but guns aren't one of our realities. So, do you guys tweak your curriculum a little bit more towards that side, or is it just there's a standard curriculum
We
that's the same everywhere?
we have a curriculum that we follow on
Mm,
the Krav defense side of things that is through the
right.
organization that we're affiliated with, and it is building on principles that will, in the higher levels of that training, allow you lots of opportunities to recognize how to respond to those threats as they come up. So
Okay.
it's not a highly detailed, super rich content of skills listed. It's at these ranks, learn these things. At these ranks, learn these things. But you're doing a lot of repetition of everything, no matter what level you're tested at. And then within a year or less than that, really, that you've done so much vertical grappling and clinch fighting and
Mm-hmm.
pummeling and various things in that mid range, which is one of the things I really liked about the Fit to Fight organization was that in my experience with a couple of other organizations in the Krav world, they dealt a lot with long range and they dealt a lot with now things have really gotten bad. So we'll call it like super red zone
Right.
and how to get out of those things. But there really wasn't that discussion of how you went from here to that red zone and how
Mm,
you could have prevented or how you could have found opportunities to not be in that problem scenario. And that's where that clinch fighting becomes a thing. It's within arm's reach. There's a lot of whole other worlds of responses you can have, but it
mm,
is much more wrestling, grappling to the point. There are strikes, but much more grappling. And if you don't know how to manage the vertical side of grappling, you're going to end up on the horizontal side of grappling.
right.
And you need to manage the energy that's in there. And coming from the background that I had in the karate world, we did a lot of distance training
Mm-hmm.
and we did do some ground training, but I gained a huge appreciation doing outside stuff with more of the kind of the judo world where you're standing up, but your hands are on a person and you're working energies for the takedowns. Well, this is kind of like another dynamic of the pre-judo side where you're working into that grasping range because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't, they will. And managing that energy is a huge piece of our curriculum heads up. The first day in, you're touching hands, you're throwing hands on collars, you're putting hands on arms and wrists, and you're making
Mm-hmm.
contact in a way that manipulates the other person's body, not just to strike, but literally to manage them. So that by the time you've done this for a few months, you can really manage how you move your body and avoid certain situations or recognize that this threat has something on their body that you don't want it to escalate towards. So it teaches a lot of that right off the bat.
Mm. No, that's interesting because yeah, you're right. Like it's either far range or really in close, and that mid range isn't dealt with too much in most Krav. Um, okay. And how much uh, as you put it, horizontal jiu-jitsu do you guys do?
Uh, Not as much as we should, but more
Okay.
than the average. I believe
All right.
and as somebody who's not, I'm not a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and I will always be the first person to say that as a person, I will always need more grappling training because I don't feel like you
Mhm.
can have enough. Um, but it's something that we have classes dedicated just for grappling, and then we have parts of our curriculum that will focus for a stretch of time on the ground elements of self-defense. The you're on your back, you have to get up. You're on your back, you have to prevent so that you can get up. You're on your back, so you have to reverse to get up. So the curriculum side of it is more like the primary goals is to get back up. You don't want to stay on your
Mhm.
back. But we have classes that will be a little bit more jujitsu oriented where you're learning staying on the ground just because you got to have that energy training as well, just like you would be with clinch fighting standing up. Yes, you don't want that, but you have to learn how to work within it also. So we do focus on that as
Nice.
training.
So, cool. So you say you start with the clinch fighting, and when you're doing when you're teaching them, is it just repetition of drills, or do you use like scenarios when in your teaching? Like how do you deliver that material?
When you have a beginning level class, it's a lot of drills. You have to do a lot of drills. You need to build repetition before you can just throw people into the fire using those skills. Otherwise, panic-stricken, hyper-responsive movements end up becoming kind of dangerous for everybody. And you're not really learning anything. So it's a lot of drills, but our warm-ups and the bulk of our class are utilizing those drills in a couple of different ways. So they're functionally learning familiar movements, moments in time, so to speak, that are in this section of class. You're learning this piece. This section, you're going to build on that, and it's going to grow so that by the end of the class, we can have a finisher that would emphasize using a lot of the stuff we drilled, but also be appropriate to the level they're at. So if it's a beginning level class, it might be drilling a bunch of strikes, all right? But we did do drills of some simple grappling drill technique or whatever it might be. It might be something as simple as a hand comes onto your shoulder, so you have to get outside the elbow line or outside that center line. So, an arm drag type movement, or, even a deflection of some kind. So you might be throwing a target, hitting pads as hard as you can for a moment, burning out, and then you have to change your focus into, here comes something towards you, or here is contact that you are just learning how to get outside of. Even though that's not necessarily the problem that will happen on the street, that is an element of what you're going to need to apply for a street environment. So, and it builds on that. So if you've got more experience, it's going to be a little bit more intense.
Nice. All right. Well, this has been a great interview. I enjoyed talking to you. If someone wanted to train with you or to learn more about your program, how can they get in contact with you? What's the best way?
Our website is themattaustin.com. And that's our handle for all of our social media accounts as well. We do trial classes, extended trials, summer specials going on right now. We have seminars that we run, bring in guest instructors, special topics within house, or bring other people outside bring them from the outside in. We've done a lot of different outreach in our communities. And so sometimes you see us doing something at a street fair, or inviting people to come take some classes here because we're involved with a farmer's market nearby, or something of that nature too. So, you can look up The Matt Austin and find us in the Cedar Park area. We got people from all over Austin coming to travel with us and train here, and come check us out.
Nice. Well, we'll also post the information as well for everybody.
Thank you.
And you talked about people can take Zoom classes as well. Is that open to people from anywhere?
Absolutely. Yeah. We coincidentally started working on a distance learning option to our membership prior to COVID. And so we were kind of set up for the infrastructure to do that. And then we just have to, keep up with, you can do virtual classes live. You can do pre-recorded classes on your own time. We've got drills that you can train on your own from home. We've got an entire learning portal that members can go to and check out all that information. So everything that's listed as a class for our current schedule is also streamed live for people to Zoom in. So if you can't make it for any reason, you can always join us online if you wish.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much for being on Krav Life. And if I'm ever out in Austin, right, once I'm allowed out of my country, right, but I'll definitely pop by and visit you guys.
I'd love to host you. That'd be great.
Perfect. All right, you take care, and and hopefully things keep opening up around the country, and more people can come out and check you guys out.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
All right. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.